Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD and University lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. Today we have a fantastic episode, which will be part one on Lucifer, the whole history of Lucifer and entities that have been called Lucifer, and how they have become entangled and disentangled with the figures of Satan and the devil. So buckle up, get a drink and a snack, and embark with me on this learning adventure. And this will be part one, as I said. So make sure to put the notification bell on so that when part two comes up, you will know and you will get the full knowledge on the topic. Exciting, huh? The figure of Lucifer represents one of Western religion's most dramatic transformations, from a benign astronomical designation to a complex symbol variously interpreted as demonic adversary, tragic rebel, and esoteric liberator. This neutral identity underwent significant transformation through biblical translation. In Jerome's 4th century Latin Vulgate, the Hebrew phrase helel ben shachar, shining one, son of dawn, that is present in Isaiah 14:12, originally a metaphorical reference to the Babylonian king's downfall, was rendered as Lucifer. While the original text employed cosmic imagery to describe a human ruler's defeat, this translation choice created linguistic foundations for later theological developments. Early church fathers gradually reinterpreted this passage as describing Satan's primordial fall, establishing Lucifer as Satan's pre-fall name. By the medieval period, Christian theology had largely merged Lucifer, Satan, and the devil into one figure representing cosmic rebellion and evil. Dante Alighieri's influential portrayal in the Inferno solidified this image in Western cultural imagination. Parallel to Orthodox interpretations, alternative views persisted in esoteric traditions that maintained Lucifer's association with light and knowledge. These approaches, drawing from Gnostic, Hermetic, and Neoplatonic influences, often viewed Lucifer not as a tempter, but as a bringer of liberating wisdom. The Romantic era expanded these alternative interpretations through literature. Milton's complex portrayal in Paradise Lost, while ostensibly orthodox, created a compelling rebel whose defiance resonated with emerging values of individual freedom. Later Romantic poets further developed Lucifer as a symbol challenging tyrannical authority. In the 19th century, esoteric movements, including Theosophy, explicitly reclaimed Lucifer as a positive symbol. Helena Blavatsky distinguished between Lucifer as light bringer and Satan as adversary, positioning Lucifer as an emblem of spiritual enlightenment rather than evil. Modern interpretations have further diversified through psychological approaches that view Lucifer as representing archetypal forces within human consciousness, as well as through contemporary Luciferian spiritual traditions that underline individual sovereignty and transformative knowledge. This episode will examine this remarkable evolution through primary sources and scholarly analysis. We will explore how religious interpretation, literary imagination, and esoteric thought have continuously reshaped this figure, which reveals broader tensions between authority and knowledge, conformity and rebellion, and orthodoxy and heterodoxy in Western religious and cultural history. But before we dive in, I'd like to remind you that this project of delivering free academic scholarship based on peer-reviewed sources and my analysis of primary sources can only exist thanks to your support. So if you have the means and want to support my work, I would really appreciate it if you consider doing so by sending donations on PayPal, joining my fantastic and ever-growing Patreon community. We have monthly lectures, a Discord server. You can also get one-to-one conversations with me, tutoring sessions, and private lectures. There's so much that you can get there, as well as on my website, drangelapuca.com, where you find all the things that I offer, including my courses. So please, I would really appreciate if you checked it out. You can also become a member on the channel. So yeah, and also you can super thank me in the comments. So any help would be appreciated. And otherwise, if you don't have the means, share my videos around, and that will also be a fantastic way of supporting me. Thank you so much for considering. And now on to our topic again. The term Lucifer originated in Greco-Roman traditions long before Christianity, functioning primarily as an astronomical designation and divine epithet. In ancient Rome, Lucifer, Latin for light bearer, referred specifically to the planet Venus as the morning star and to light associated deities without any negative moral connotations. This designation reflected the Roman understanding of celestial bodies within their cosmological framework. Roman astronomical terminology largely derived from Greek predecessors, where the morning star was called phosphoros, meaning light bringer. Greeks applied this designation to deities associated with light and knowledge, including Apollo and Eos, the goddess of dawn. In Roman literature, Lucifer appears consistently as a beneficial celestial entity. Ovid describes Lucifer as the morning star that heralds the coming dawn, while Cicero in De Natura Deorum references Lucifer simply as a celestial body entirely separate from any concept of rebellion or malevolence. I should also add the correct pronunciation in Latin would be Luciferus for the male and Lucifera for the female. This would be the correct Latin pronunciation in medieval pronunciation. And this is rendered in English as Lucifer. So just a little note about Latin pronunciation in case you are aficionados. In Roman religious practice, Venus as Lucifer, morning star, received veneration alongside other planetary deities. Archaeological evidence from Roman temples and inscriptions confirms that Venus in her morning star aspect held positive associations with new beginnings and the transition from darkness to light. The constellation of planetary deities in Roman religion formed part of a complex system where celestial bodies represented divine forces operating in predictable, observable patterns across the heavens. Scant evidence may suggest connections between Lucifer and Mercury in Roman thought, particularly in astrological texts. Both were associated with transitions and liminal states, though their domains remained largely distinct in formal religious practice. Mercury's role as psychopomp, a guide of souls, and messenger, represented different aspects of divine mediation than Lucifer's function as herald of daylight. So, was Lucifer used as an epithet for Roman deities? In Roman religion and literature, Lucifer was indeed occasionally used as an epithet, but in a limited and specific context rather than as a common divine title. Let me clarify this more. The Romans primarily used Lucifer, light bearer, as the proper astronomical designation for the morning star, the planet Venus when visible before sunrise. This was a direct Latin equivalent of the Greek phosphoros. It functioned primarily as a technical astronomical term rather than a religious epithet. So when is it that Lucifer appears in connection with deities? Because it does. And so in this case, it was most commonly used as one, an epithet for the minor deity personifying the morning star itself. This celestial deity was sometimes considered a son of Aurora, the goddess of dawn, or occasionally associated with aspects of Apollo's domain. However, these represented a poetic personification rather than a major cult figure in Roman religion. A second case would be an occasional poetic epithet for light-associated deities, particularly Apollo in his solar aspect. The poet Ovid, for example, uses celestial imagery, including morning star references when describing Apollo, though not necessarily using Lucifer directly as Apollo's title. A third case where we find this is a descriptive term in limited context for deities bringing light or associated with dawn, such as Diana or Diana in her aspect of light bringer. So what's important to understand is that unlike major divine epithets like Jupiter Optimus Maximus or Apollo Medicus, Lucifer was not commonly used in formal religious contexts, temple inscriptions, or ritual invocations for major deities. We don't find evidence of established temple cults to Apollo Lucifer or formalized worship practice using this title. Archaeological evidence, including temple dedications, votive inscriptions, and religious calendars from the Roman period, doesn't show Lucifer being used as a common cultic epithet in the way that other divine titles were regularly employed. This suggests it remained primarily an astronomical term and literary device rather than a significant religious designation. When examining classical sources like Cicero, Virgil, and Ovid, we find Lucifer used predominantly in its astronomical sense, with poetic or metaphorical extensions that occasionally touch on divine associations but don't establish it as a standard divine epithet in Roman religious practice. The association between Lucifer and major Roman deities like Sol Invictus, which is often claimed in later esoteric literature, lacks substantial evidence in primary Roman sources and appears to be a later interpretation rather than reflecting actual Roman religious practice. Thus, in its original Roman context, we can say that Lucifer functioned primarily as an astronomical term and divine epithet without negative associations. The transformation into a name for Satan represents a significant semantic evolution driven by theological interpretations rather than classical understanding, which shows how religious symbolism can profoundly alter the meaning of cultural concepts over time. So let's look at this theological and historical development. The concept of Lucifer underwent significant transformation as Christianity developed, evolving from a celestial designation, as we have seen, associated with Venus, to a theological symbol of rebellion. This evolution resulted primarily from specific scriptural interpretations, particularly in Isaiah 14:12, and the gradual development of Christian demonology. The identification of Lucifer with Satan, now taken for granted in popular culture, emerged through a complex historical process rather than being present in earliest Christian thought. Isaiah 14:12 contains the Hebrew phrase helel ben shachar, meaning shining one, son of dawn. Modern biblical scholarship confirms this passage constitutes a taunt against the Babylonian king, using cosmic imagery to criticize his hubris and predict his downfall. The text employs the morning star as a metaphor for a ruler whose brilliance fades, with no indication in the original Hebrew context that it refers to a supernatural being or fallen angel. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of Hebrew scriptures from the 3rd, 1st centuries BCE, translated this phrase as Heosphoros, meaning dawn bringer. When Jerome produced his Latin Vulgate translation in the late 4th century CE, he rendered the term as Lucifer, the standard Latin designation for the morning star. Importantly, Jerome did not intend this as reference to Satan, as evidenced by his use of the same term Lucifer in 2 Peter 1:19 to describe Christ as the morning star, phosphoros in Greek, rising in believers' hearts. Early Christian exegesis did not immediately connect the Isaiah passage to Satan. Justin Martyr and Tertullian, writing in the 2nd century CE, referred to Satan as a fallen angel but did not specifically identify him with Lucifer or the Isaiah passage. Origen made tentative connections between Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, about the king of Tyre, and the concept of angelic rebellion in his work De Principiis, but his interpretations were speculative rather than doctrinal assertions. Augustine of Hippo further developed the theology of angelic fall through pride but did not explicitly identify Lucifer with Satan in his major works. In The City of God, Augustine discusses fallen angels without directly citing the Isaiah passage as their origin story. The gradual association developed over centuries rather than through a single authoritative pronouncement. The full identification of Lucifer with Satan solidified during the early medieval period. Several influences contributed to this theological development, including apocryphal literature. While the Book of Enoch, composed between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, describes rebellious angels, particularly their leader Samyaza or Azazel, it never explicitly names Lucifer. Nevertheless, its narratives of angelic rebellion provided conceptual frameworks later applied to Lucifer. By the 12th and 13th centuries, theological texts and popular religious literature had cemented the Lucifer-Satan connection. Pope Gregory the Great's influential Moralia in Job interpreted Isaiah 14:12 as referring to Satan's fall, helping establish this reading as authoritative. Thomas Aquinas systematized demonology in his Summa Theologica and described Lucifer as the highest angel before his fall through pride. Dante Alighieri's Inferno provided a vivid literary portrayal of Lucifer as a monstrous, three-faced figure frozen in the lowest circle of hell. However, Dante Alighieri's depiction represented artistic elaboration rather than established doctrine, and combined classical and biblical imagery with medieval folk beliefs. The Malleus Maleficarum from 1486-1487, while influential in witchcraft persecutions, does not actually emphasize Lucifer above other demonic figures. Its demonology focuses more on practical identification of supposed witchcraft than on systematic hierarchy of demons. Modern scholarship has challenged older assumptions about its centrality in medieval thought, noting that it represents an extreme position rather than mainstream medieval theology. Protestant Reformation theologians generally maintained the identification of Lucifer with Satan, though with distinct emphasis. Martin Luther addressed the fallen angel primarily as Satan rather than Lucifer, and focused on his ongoing opposition to Christian faith rather than his origins. John Calvin similarly highlighted Satan's limited power under divine sovereignty rather than elaborating on his fall. John Milton's Paradise Lost from 1667 profoundly influenced cultural perceptions of Lucifer, portraying him as a complex, tragic figure whose famous declaration, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven," captured his defiance. Milton's epic represents literary interpretation rather than theological innovation, and draws on Renaissance humanism and Protestant theology to create a nuanced antagonist. Lucifer's rehabilitation in certain esoteric traditions began during the Renaissance with the revival of Neoplatonic and Hermetic texts. These movements did not universally reclaim Lucifer by name, but often reinterpreted light-bringing figures more positively. During the Enlightenment, figures like Goethe reimagined Mephistopheles, a devil figure, as a catalyst for human development rather than merely a tempter. Eliphas Lévy, Dogme rituel de la haute magie from 1854-1856, did discuss Lucifer as a symbolic principle of enlightenment and liberty, though his system remained within an essentially Christian framework. Helena Blavatsky's Theosophical Writings from 1888 more explicitly reinterpreted Lucifer as representing divine intelligence and spiritual evolution, deliberately challenging orthodox Christian demonology. Contemporary Luciferian movements vary considerably in their theology and practices. Some represent philosophical approaches that highlight self-knowledge and enlightenment rather than worship of a literal being, while others combine elements from various esoteric traditions. The transformation of Lucifer from celestial designation to fallen angel exemplifies how religious concepts evolve through translation, interpretation, and cultural adaptation. This process involved multiple factors: translation choices, theological speculation, literary imagination, and changing religious needs across different historical periods. Contemporary biblical scholarship generally recognizes the Lucifer Satan connection as a post biblical development rather than an inherent meaning of the original Hebrew text. This evolution demonstrates how religious symbols continuously adapt to address the spiritual, intellectual, and cultural concerns of different eras. Now, let's cover the topic of whether there was an Italic Lucifer, a pre Christian Italic or Roman Lucifer. This is something important to address because there are some practitioners that are focusing on this aspect, so I thought I would include it here. So, in ancient Rome, as we have seen, Lucifer functioned primarily as an astronomical designation for the morning star, Venus particularly, rather than as a personified deity with an established cult. Roman religion recognized various celestial deities, but historical and archaeological evidence does not support claims of distinct pre Christian Lucifer worship in Italy. The planet Venus received veneration within the broader Roman pantheon, but specifically as Lucifer, morning star, distinct ritual practices are not well documented in surviving religious calendars, temple dedications, or votive inscriptions. The Roman god Sol, rather Sol Invictus, was associated with light and cosmic order, but primary sources establish only general celestial connections rather than specific cultic relationships between Sol and Lucifer, Venus as the morning star. While astronomical observations were important to Roman religion, the evidence suggests that Lucifer remained primarily an astronomical designation rather than developing into a major cultic figure with dedicated worship practices. Medieval Italian folk practices did preserve certain pre Christian elements, but evidence for a continuous alternative Luciferian tradition, specifically preserved in rural Italy, is limited. Medieval Italian folk magic, as documented in inquisitorial records and literary sources, shows considerable Christian influence rather than preserved paganism. When non Christian elements appear in these records, they typically involve saints, the Madonna, celestial bodies, and nature spirits rather than explicitly named pagan deities or a benevolent Lucifer figure. Rural magical practitioners in medieval and early modern Italy operated within a primarily Christian worldview, albeit one that incorporated heterodox elements. When Lucifer appeared in folk practices, historical records indicate he was generally understood within a Christian cosmological framework as a demonic entity, though sometimes invoked for practical magical purposes. The concept of a benevolent Lucifer specifically preserved from pre Christian times lacks substantiation in contemporary historical sources. And there we go. We've got to cover Charles Leland's Aradia if we talk about Lucifer. So, Charles Godfrey Leland's Aradia, or the Gospel of the Witches from 1899, presents a narrative where Lucifer appears as the consort of the goddess Diana or Diana. However, modern scholarly analysis indicates that Leland's work cannot be taken as direct evidence of ancient continuous traditions. The text emerged from a complex interplay of factors including Leland's research interest, 19th century views on folklore, Victorian esoteric thought, and information from his primary informant, Maddalena, whose reliability cannot be independently verified. The Diana Lucifer mythology presented in Aradia lacks corroboration in other historical sources predating Leland's work. Contemporary folklorists and historians of religion have identified significant methodological problems in his research approach. The text combines elements from various sources, including Italian folklore, classical mythology, and 19th century esoteric concepts, and really shows the cultural environment of late Victorian interest in pagan survivals rather than documenting an ancient unbroken tradition. The term Stregheria doesn't exist in Italian and has been inaccurately depicted as Italian witchcraft by Americans with Italian heritage in the 20th century, gaining structure first among Italian American communities before being further developed by practitioners such as Raven Grimassi starting in the 1980s. Contemporary Stregheria reinterprets for an American audience multiple sources, including Italian folk Catholicism, Etruscan and Roman religion, modern neo-pagan frameworks, and family traditions. The specific inclusion of Lucifer as a positive deity appears more closely connected to 20th century esoteric reinterpretations than to documented historical Italian folk practices. While some elements incorporate genuine aspects of Italian folk traditions, its theological structure shows significant modern influences. And on this note, I'd like to remind you that I have a dedicated video on Aradia and all the evidence or lack thereof that we have about that. And also there's a specific video on Stregheria and whether it's Italian witchcraft. Spoiler, it's not. And also I have multiple videos on Italian witchcraft, like authentic, actual Italian witchcraft, because it's something that I have done my PhD on, and I have published a book with Brill recently. Called Italian Witchcraft and Shamanism. So, just in case you're interested in deepening more the topic. The relationship between the Catholic Church and Italian folk beliefs has always been complex and characterized by both opposition and accommodation. While the Church opposed explicitly non Christian practices, many folk religious customs were incorporated into local Catholic observances through a process of syncretism, which allows for the continuation of certain traditional elements within an officially Christian framework. The Inquisition in Italy did prosecute cases of witchcraft and magic, but historical records indicate that Italian inquisitors were often more moderate than their northern European counterparts. When folk practitioners were accused of invoking Lucifer, court records suggest that both the accused and their accusers generally understood this within a Christian framework as invoking a demonic entity rather than as a participation in an alternative theological tradition. The evidence for distinct continuous tradition of benevolent Lucifer veneration in Italian folk religion is limited and problematic. While elements of pre-Christian beliefs certainly persisted in Italian folk practices, documented references to Lucifer in Italian historical sources typically appear within a Christianized framework, even when invoked for magical purposes. Modern interpretations positing a continuous pagan Lucifer tradition often reflect 19th century and 20th century esoteric developments rather than historically documented pre-modern practices. Now on to Lucifer, Satan, and the devil, and the mixing and the differences between these. The figures of Lucifer, Satan, and the devil are frequently treated as interchangeable in contemporary culture, but their origins and theological developments reveal distinct identities that only gradually merged through historical processes. Each figure emerged from different religious contexts and underwent significant transformation before becoming conflated in later Christian theology. The term Lucifer, as we have seen, was a neutral astronomical designation for the morning star, and its transformation into a fallen angel figure stemmed primarily from interpretations of Isaiah 14:12, where the Hebrew phrase for shining one, son of dawn, was translated as Lucifer in Jerome's Latin Vulgate in the 4th century CE. This passage originally referred to the Babylonian king's downfall, using celestial imagery as a metaphor rather than describing a supernatural being. Several church fathers contributed to reinterpreting this passage as referring to a primordial angelic fall. We have seen that Origen introduced theological speculations about celestial beings falling from grace in his work De Principis, although he did not explicitly identify Lucifer with Satan. Augustine further developed the concept of angelic rebellion through pride in his The City of God, and provided a theological foundation for later interpretations. The figure of Satan, from Hebrew Hasatan, meaning the adversary or the accuser, has distinctly different origins. In the Hebrew Bible, Satan appears not as a cosmic force of evil, but as a functionary within the divine court. In the book of Job, Satan questions Job's motives but operates within divine parameters as a prosecutorial figure rather than an independent power opposing God. This legal adversarial role continues in Zechariah 3:1-2, where Satan stands as an accuser against the high priest Joshua. These early biblical depictions represent Satan as subordinate to divine authority rather than as a rebellious figure. The concept of Satan as a fallen angel or cosmic opponent emerges more clearly in Second Temple Jewish literature. From 200 BCE to 100 CE, particularly in apocalyptic texts like 1 Enoch, which describes rebellious angels called Watchers. However, these texts do not explicitly name their leader as Lucifer. The New Testament depicts Satan in a more adversarial role. In the Gospels, Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness, and Jesus refers to him as the ruler of this world. Revelation 12:7-9 describes a war in heaven where the dragon, identified as the devil and Satan, is cast down with his angels. Yet, even these texts do not explicitly identify Satan with Lucifer. The concept of the devil as a singular embodiment of cosmic evil represents a later development in religious thought. This figure emerged through the synthesis of various traditions, including biblical Satan, apocalyptic literature, and elements from surrounding cultures. Medieval Christian theology constructed the devil as the supreme enemy of God, responsible for temptation, corruption, and human suffering. This conceptual development was influenced by several factors. One would be the dualistic religious systems like Zoroastrianism, which posited Angra Mainyu, Ahriman, as an evil counterforce to the good deity Ahura Mazda. Two, the Greco-Roman underworld deities and chthonic figures. Three, apocalyptic literature that increasingly highlighted cosmic dualism, and folk beliefs and regional traditions incorporated into Christian demonology. By the early medieval period, theologians and ecclesiastical authorities had begun to consolidate these various strands into a coherent demonology. The devil became the head of a hierarchical kingdom of demons, a concept solidified in inquisitorial literature such as the Malleus Maleficarum, which systematized beliefs about diabolical witchcraft. Dante Alighieri's Inferno also provided one of the most influential literary portrayals of this unified demonic figure, depicting Lucifer, referred to as Dis and Satan, as a monstrous, three-faced being trapped in the center of hell. This literary treatment helped cement the conflation of Lucifer and Satan in popular imagination. Despite the medieval Christian conflation of these figures, certain philosophical and esoteric traditions maintained or developed alternative interpretations. Renaissance Hermeticism and occultism sometimes viewed Lucifer as a symbol of hidden wisdom rather than evil. Giordano Bruno and other heterodox thinkers explored more nuanced understandings of light-bringing figures that challenged orthodox demonology. In the 19th century, theosophist Helena Blavatsky explicitly argued for separating Lucifer from Satan, suggesting that Lucifer represented divine intelligence and enlightenment rather than evil. She compared him to Prometheus, who brought forbidden knowledge to humanity. Romantic poets and philosophers further complicated this distinction. William Blake's complex mythology in works like The Marriage of Heaven and Hell reimagined traditional religious figures, while Milton's early portrayal of Satan in Paradise Lost as a tragic, defiant figure influenced later literary treatment. Contemporary Luciferian spiritual movements generally distinguish their veneration of Lucifer from devil worship and emphasize themes of enlightenment, self-knowledge, and personal sovereignty rather than evil or opposition to divine principles. And if you're interested in knowing more about the contemporary representations of Lucifers in Left and Path contemporary traditions, you've got to stay tuned for part 2 of this overview of Lucifer. In the meantime, if you watched until this point, congratulations. You are very committed to your education, and I'm super proud of you. And also, please leave me a morning star in the comment, a morning star emoji. I don't know what it could be, like a little star, or I will let you decide. But yeah, leave me a morning star emoji in the comment section if you watched until this point. And I'd like to remind you, and this is my bibliography. This will never fit into the description box because I have a limited amount of characters. So here it is. So you can pause and check it out. As you can tell, it took a lot of research to to do this video. And I have to thank Andrew Reitenmeyer for being my research assistant. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and all my episodes, hopefully. And if you like this project of delivering free scholarly content in esotericism to everybody for free, it would be amazing if you became a patron and supported me in any of the ways that you can. You can use PayPal, Patreon, Coffee, YouTube memberships, super thank me in the comments or checking out my services at drangelapuca.com. I really appreciate any help, even the smallest one. Everything really is important and matters. So please consider doing so if you can afford it at all. And if you don't have the means, I would still massively appreciate it if you shared my videos around so that the symposium can grow. So that's a free way of supporting me, and always deeply appreciated. If you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell, because YouTube is naughty and will not notify you every time that I post a new video or show it in your feed. Which also reminds me that you really want to sign up for my newsletter, because that's the best way to stay in contact with me. We are seeing that the world is a strange place these days, and social media platforms can take any turn, and be bought by anybody. So to stay in contact with me, the best way is definitely, if you don't want to join my Patreon, is definitely and joining my newsletter, because that way we can stay in contact and I can keep you posted on things. So if any of my social media becomes banned or whatever, I still have your contact, and you will still know what I'm up to, and it's free. So do sign up for my newsletter, and let me know in the comments what you thought about this video, and share my content around. And thank you all so much for being here. You're really the reason why I keep doing this. So it really means a lot to me that you're here, and I hope that you will keep staying here, and stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now. Today we hold that God will